Good evening to everybody. I want to tell the story about my father and my grandfather and family. My father wrote a book that he calls My Yiddish Father and Me. And he builds the book on diaries that my grandfather wrote from he arrived in Denmark to the last day. Every day was a little sentence or two, and on that he built the book. And so this is their story. Now, Shmuel Balin was born. Here we have Shmuel and Leah Balin. They were born in a little shtetl called Shidrin in White Russia, outside Minsk. Shmuel arrived in Copenhagen in 1906, and Leah arrived in 1907. This picture is from 1910, when they were in Copenhagen, living among all the immigrants. They were very poor. But they wanted to come outside. They wanted to leave the city and have a little more green around them. So in 1914, they moved to a place later that is called Søborg. Could we have the next picture? Yes. Here we see my father. He is pointing upstairs. They rented a very small flat up under the roof, under the ceiling there. And that's where they lived the whole their lives. And they had 3 boys in the 2 small rooms that was there. The boys went to the local school, and everybody lived a normal Danish life. Everybody was Danes. There might be those that was speaking with an accent, but so what? That everybody was just a part of the daily life. My father was very active, not in Jewish organization, but he was very active in youth movements of the Labor Party. And he started, he just took part, then he was a leader. And in 1940, he became the leader of the whole region of the youth organization in this area. Now, the 9th of April, we'll need to see the next picture. The 9th of April, 1940, Germany conquered Denmark. And in the beginning, they resisted, but Denmark didn't have a strong army. And after 23 soldiers was killed, the king, Christian X, he sent out a flyer to the Danish people. He said, "We surrender. We're letting the German troops come here. And I'm asking for the Danish population to accept that and not to show any resistance." And they say they are our friends. They don't want to harm us. They just want to be closer to England. Now, the king was a very popular figure in Denmark. He every day rode the streets of Copenhagen, and anybody who wanted could go up to him and talk with him. He didn't need guards or anything around him. And we see here, this is Ebba, who later became my mother. She is bringing him a bouquet of flower. This was in September 1940 on his 17th birthday. And so that was fine. She was also active in the youth movement where my father was. That's where they get to know each other. Now, Denmark, there was a Danish government which was freely elected, which continued. All the Danish institutions, they also continued the way they had been doing. And life more or less continued the same way. Of course, they were still occupation. So they had, everybody need to have blackout shades for their windows. There was censure. You couldn't write whatever you wanted, and you could certainly not make fun of the Germans. And but else life just continued the way there was. And Jews was Danes like everybody else. There was no laws that was changed. There was no race laws in Denmark, and nobody had to wear a yellow star. Now, the government decided in 1941 they decided to form a civil defense force all over Denmark. And my father was called up for that. He was in the part of the fire department where he worked, but here we see him in his uniform. And the next picture shows his service book. Yes, that he had there, and the Civil Defense Force. Now he continued what he was doing, and there was politically, he had a lot of friends in political, and he was very active. He loved to write. He loved to write newspapers. The first newspaper he wrote, he was 9 years old, and he continued his whole life. That was his great passion. He also he wrote in all their labor parties, their newspapers and their magazines, in all the legal ones. But he also wrote the illegal ones, the ones which were telling the news that they got from BBC, from the radio, that nobody was supposed to know about, and they delivered this newspaper around to people. And life continued like that. But slowly, there were more and more resistance against the German. A lot of Danes, they said, we do not want to cooperate with the Germans. We don't want after the war that it will be said that Denmark cooperated with Germany. And a lot of underground movements, like resistance movements, was formed all over the country. And they started slowly their work, their sabotage and whatever they could do. Now, it became more and more. And in the summer of 43, it came to a sea. We call it the hot summer. They blew up train tracks, factories, anywhere that worked with the Germans, and so on. Oh, I forgot now where I was. Yes. And so in 43, it was too much for the German. They were very angry because Denmark was, for the Germans, it was their pantry. That was where they could get the food, and they could get they had a lot of factories, and people was producing things they needed for their war machine, which was actually why they let Denmark leave it the way it was. But now when Danes didn't behave so nice and blew up everything, they were very angry. They gave an ultimatum to the Danish government. They said to them, you will have to make a new law that gives a death sentence for anyone taking part in sabotage, and you will have to execute them. And here the Germans passed the red line for the Danes. They said, no way are we going to do that. And the government resigned. From that moment, Denmark actually had a state of emergency. There was no government from then on to the end of the war. General Werner Best, which were the German in Denmark, he saw, this is a good opportunity to deal with the Jews. They have been allowed to be left until now. They had their synagogue, they have their everything, nothing was touched. And so he thought this was a good idea now to collect them, to catch them. And he asked the permission from Hitler to do an actia. And Hitler, of course, said yes. And so he came back and he went to his colleague which were Geo Ferdinand Dukvich, who worked, he was a marine attaché in the German embassy in Denmark. Dukvich was actually, had been many years in Denmark. He knew Danish. He had a lot of friends also in the former government between the politician, and he knew the mentality of the Danes. And he said to Werner Best, it's not worth it for us. Let's not do that. But Werner Best said, that's what we're doing. The Aksha will be on the night between the 1st and the 2nd of October. And you will have to prepare the ship that will take the Jews to Germany. Now in Denmark, there was around 7,000 Jews on that time. Dukvich became very angry. And he thought about what to do. He traveled to Berlin. He asked Hitler to cancel the order. Hitler, of course, said, no, this is our policy. And Dukvich returned to Denmark, thought what to do. Then he traveled to Stockholm. Stockholm is the capital of Sweden. Sweden was neutral. He went to talk with the prime minister, and he asked him, will you accept all the Danish Jews? And the prime minister said, with pleasure, we will take all the Jews, or anyone that are escaping from the Germans, they can come to Sweden. So he came back to Denmark, and he had a secret meeting. They say they met in a public restroom somewhere. He met with his two friends that was the former government, Hans Hedtoft and H.C. Hansen, and he told them what was going to happen. This was the 29th of September. And he told them in the night between the 1st and 2nd of October, they are going to hunt the Jews. They have all the addresses. We need to get the Jews out of their flats, hide them, and in the meantime, arrange for transportation to Sweden. And everybody started, from there on, everybody started to be active right away. I wanted to tell now, while I'm remembered, that Dukvich in 1971, he was called the Righteous Among Nations from Yad Vashem here in Israel. He was also, because he was responsible for the boats, it's told, I didn't really got it confirmed, but I think it is right. He called in the big German warships that was along the coastline. He told them that they needed to go into deck to have service. They need to be serviced, so they were ready. In these days that the Jews actually went over. Now, so the politicians starting their work, they told the leader of the Jewish congregation, Mr. Henriques, and they told the rabbi, Mr. Marcus Malchior. And we see here the Better Knesset, which is the next picture. Marcus Melchior was telling everybody that came to the morning prayer, the day of the Jewish New Year, Rosh Hashanah, Erev Rosh Hashanah. He told them, all of them, from here, you go home, you take the most important things, and you leave your flat. Nobody moves with the whole family together, and you don't sleep in your flat. Nobody will sleep anymore in their flats. And they left and spread the words. At the same time, my father was called to the headquarters of the Labour Party, and they told him, listen, this is what's going to happen. You are a Jew. You will have to flee too with everybody else, and tell everybody as fast as you can so they can hide, and we will arrange everything. It was the party, the political parties, the resistant movements, trade unions, everybody actually took part in this, because when the word came out that this was going to happen, there was declared a general strike in Denmark, which means that everybody, a lot of people, they were free to help in this whole organization. And I think it's quite amazing that within a day or two, you didn't see a Jew. They were poof, just disappeared, all of them. Now, my father went home to their little flat, and he told his mother that went on foot to the people around them to tell them what was going to happen. And to the flat also came my father's friends, his political friends, and also the people from the underground movement, and wanted to help him to pack. Now, there was not much to pack, because the order was that nobody was allowed to take a suitcase with them. You know, they had to leave and not together. So everybody felt like they were bears. They were with 3 sweaters, 2 coats, and how much clothes they could put on them, and with a little handbag with maybe underwear, socks, and a toothbrush. And then they left the flat. So each one went. My grandfather went with a friend, with a non-Jewish friend. You know, they took him to their house, and that's the way they did. So when people came and fetched them and brought everybody everywhere they were willing to help, or most places, I will say. If it was in hospitals, it was in police stations, it was people, private homes. They had summer houses that they didn't live in. They would open up where refugees could hide themselves, in cellars and in ceilings. Overall, it was just simply amazing the way everybody got together in order to help this thing. Now, my grandmother, Leia, was the one that locked their door, and she went downstairs to Mrs. Jensen, that was her very good friend. She gave her the key, and she said, take whatever you need. We don't know if we come back. They hugged and they cried. And Mrs. Jensen said, I will take good care of your flat. And she left to wherever it was they took her. Now, yes, the Germans that was in Denmark on that time, they were older and they were not Gestapo. They had been already in Denmark for 2.5 years, and they had eaten good food, and they had a better life than most German soldiers other places. They were not aggressive. And the order they got was they got a list. You go on to these addresses, you knock on the door, you're not allowed to break down the door. And if nobody answers, they had to leave. And that's actually what they did. They went from place to place, and most of the flats was empty. And in one of the places, when they were just ready to leave, a very kind neighbor, he said, yeah, but the son lives upstairs. So the German looked at the list. He said, he is not on my list. And he left. And like this, there's a lot of history, how people escape. Still, unfortunately, there were some Jews that did not believe that a thing like this could happen in Denmark, and they were home and they were caught. And altogether, 473 Jews was caught and sent to the camp, to Theresienstadt, the concentration camp Theresienstadt, where they stayed to the end of the war. They did not transfer them to other places, to death camps, and they stayed there where they were. Now, the Danish police, they have got the order that in no circumstances were they allowed to help the Germans catch Danes. It was said very clearly, Danes. Nobody talked about Jews. It was Danes, and if they could help the Danes, then that's what they should. If they saw flats they were left empty, they should close them up, lock them up, and they should tell the municipalities where they were. A lot of the municipalities paid the rent for people while they were in Sweden. That's what happened for my grandparents. The municipality paid their rent while they were gone. Now, see if I remembered everything. So they started to transfer with people over there. My family got the message that they would leave the 7th of October. And we see here page, okay, we see first the rescue map. Yeah, of course. This is the rescue map. And we see on one side, we see all the yellow spots is places from where they went out fisher boats all the way. And on the Swedish side, you can see all the point where the boats went in. My family landed in Landskrona when they got. Now, the next picture, we'll see the diary of my grandfather. He wrote the 7th of October, my last day in Denmark. He wrote the 8th of October, first day in Sweden. You see it's in Yiddish, and he had a very nice handwriting. And anyhow, so he's telling that at 4 o'clock, a car came to fetch them wherever they were, and they had collecting the rest of the family, and they started to drive towards the harbor of Copenhagen. Now, they changed cars on the way in order not to be caught, and unfortunately, some people were caught. And on the whole route that they were going, there was people on the street, on the corners, which were giving signs to whether the road was free or not, if they see Germans or not. And so my grandparents, my father and his youngest brother, they were free to go to the harbor. The older brother, Jakob, together with his wife, they got the sign not to go on, to return. Luckily, they arrived in Sweden a couple of days later, and they were not caught. So we have here, okay, now, okay, so, okay. So here they are arriving here to the harbor at 5 o'clock, and we see here the fishing boat. It was this kind of fishing boat. It had to be fishing boats where you couldn't see people. You only had 1 or 2 fishermen that were fishing, so the Germans would not be suspicious. It was just an ordinary fishing boat. So what they did was that they actually helped people down where they usually kept the fish. It was an absolutely wonderful smell, I have heard. And there was no room to stretch your leg or whatever, but it was fine. And so they were down there in the boat. And at 6 o'clock, they left the harbor of Copenhagen. After a couple of hours, the fishermen told them, you can come up now, stretch your legs and breathe. We are in Swedish territory. And that's yes, here we see they all come up. All of a sudden, there's a lot of people. And you can see and I know my grandmother said that she couldn't stretch her legs. It took a while before she could stand the way they were crammed together. But that's a minor problem. Anyhow, the Swedish warships was going up and down of the coast of Sweden, and it was spreading projectors over the water to see if they saw any of the small boats coming. When they saw the small boats, they would get closer to the boats, and they would bring all the people up on the big boat. That's the way my family arrived in Landskrona at 11 o'clock at night. They were welcomed by the Swedish police. There was always also Danish police, because a lot of Danish police had escaped from Denmark, and they were there. And my father was in uniform still. Here they got a letter when they arrived, where they wrote, welcome to all of you. We will try as much as we can to help you have a normal life, but please don't go alone anywhere. Just wait we will organize it, and you will wait for what they said. When they saw my father that he was in a uniform, they took him aside. Great, you can help us organize. So he got a group that he was going to go to the building of the municipality, where they slept on the floor the first night and freedom. And my grandparents, which were older, was together with other old people taking to a castle called Ørnes Castle. It was not really it was a hotel. But my grandfather, we were treated royally. They have never big like they were used to their little flat. So here they stayed in the beginning in Sweden. And so the next morning, my father got the order to take a group of people and go with a train, and he would go to Mulsjö. There was a ski hotel that was free, and where they could stay. And immediately my father was asked to arrange it. And he tried, arrange everybody and organize everybody and find some and write down what anybody needed. The Swedish said, write down what they need. Somebody needed maybe medicine or clothes or whatever. But mostly worried them in the beginning was they didn't know where the rest of the family was. They didn't know if everybody had come to Sweden and what happened with those that did not come to Sweden. But they were there for 2 months, and slowly they calmed down, and they got letters from their other relatives from other places in Sweden. After 2 months, my father got the new order that he was to take a group, and they were going to Söderköping. In Söderköping is a beautiful little village by a canal called Götakanalen. There they had a spa hotel where they stayed for the first night. And then the next day there was an office for the Danish refugees. It was not only Jews, there was lots of others, resistant fighters and that had come to Sweden too. And then there was also an employment office. Everybody had to work. From the age of 18 to 55, everybody had to work. So my father found work in a carpentry shop, and that suited him fine. And he rented a room together with a friend. If we can see the next picture, it's Elsa and Einar Johansson. Einar Johansson was conscripted to the Swedish army, which most of the Swedish men was. So she was alone, and she could rent out a room to my father and his friend. My father was very happy to be here, especially because Elsa was a very active person in the Labour Party in Söderköping. It didn't take him many days, and then he was already busy with the same things as he used to be in the political party, in the youth movements, and so on. And he was asked to organize a club. They gave him a room where he could make a club for the Danes, where they could meet in the evening, drink coffee and tea, and talk together. And there he, in the time, arranged parties, and they had entertainment, and there were a lot of artists that also were in Sweden. So they have, they were playing and entertaining each other there in the evening. And they kind of continue life like this, more or less. In the end of 1944, No. Wait. Take it away. Yeah. Um, when they came to Söderköping, after a couple of months, they got the first postcard from Theresienstadt. And they were very happy because everybody was so aware. Nobody knew, are they alive or are they dead? And there was nothing written on the postcard on which condition they were living under, but at least they knew they were alive. They got permission from the Red Cross to send packages to them. And they got them. We know that they got those packages. And I have no doubt that it helped them survive the war. And so now in the end of 44, General Montgomery from England, he was responsible for also there, he decided to form a Danish brigade in Sweden that was going to practice and train and get ready that they could go over and fight the Germans. So here my father, now we can show the next picture. My father volunteered immediately to take part in the Danish brigade. He went to Landskrona. This was in February 1945. This is his armband. This is the armband that they had. They were training very hard, he writes, and every day they were running a long stretch. They run from Landskrona against the water, up on a hill, something up to the top. And from there they could see Denmark. They were singing the Danish anthem, and then they ran all the way back to their army camp. And that's how they continued day after day. Now, in the meantime, Mr. Bernadotte, who was leader of the Red Cross in Sweden, got commission from Himmler to go to Theresienstadt and fetch all the Scandinavian prisoners. He created what is called the white buses. He painted them in white and with red crosses that nobody should confuse it with army trucks or, it was not without danger to drive through a war-torn Europe at that time. But he did it. That was in March 45. They went down to Theresienstadt and he brought back all the Scandinavian prisoners that we see here on the next picture. They came back here and nearly all of them survived except 53 Danes died in the camp, but it was mainly from age or sickness. They were not killed or executed. Anyhow, so Mr. Bernadotte, he asked Himmler if he could go back and take other prisoners from other concentration camps. And he said, yes, okay. I guess he was happy to get rid of them. And he went down again with his white buses. And I want to tell you that he actually brought back 31,000 prisoners to Sweden from the different camps, which I think is amazing. Now, in the meantime, my father is training in Landskrona. They have the other army camp. And one day they're called together and said that they are going to divide the camp into two. And they have to prepare mattresses, a lot of mattresses, because they are going to accept prisoners from the camps. And so they were preparing mattresses. They took sacks and filled them with straw and paper, and a lot of them. They arrived, 1,000 women and young girls from Hungary arrived there with the bike buses to Landskrona. My father writes in his book that they were in a terrible state, physically and mentally. A lot of them had been medical experiments for Dr. Mengele, and they had been misused in every way. And a lot of them could not walk off the buses. They were carried. A lot of them was carried into the camp. Together with them was a priest that spoke Hungarian. And he said to the soldiers, listen, they're speaking another language that I don't understand. I think it is Yiddish. Is there any of you that speaks Yiddish? So everybody pointed to my father. And he said, okay, I will say welcome in Hungarian. Will you be willing to say welcome in Yiddish? And my father said, of course, with pleasure. And that's what happened. First the priest talked, and then my father got up and he started, and he opened his mouth, and only a couple of words in Yiddish came out, and then they started a tumult. All the women, they started screaming and yelling and crying and laughing. They were completely in shock. They had been told that not one Jewish man was alive anymore. And here in front of them is a young Danish soldier. He's a Jew and he speaks Yiddish. That was a moment that my father never forgot. It stayed with him his whole life. He told the story many, many times. And he said how everybody, even the soldiers, everybody was crying in the end. Now they tried, when they were not training in their free time, they tried to help the girls, to buy them small things or help them with whatever they needed, and in order for them to return to life again, slowly, slowly. And that's how they did, and that was in April. Now, the 4th of May, 1945, Montgomery declared that the Germans had surrendered without conditions, and Denmark was free. And of course, that was a great pleasure. Everybody was happy in Denmark. The first thing they did was to pull down those blackout shades that they had for their windows. They put candles in the one moment, and from then on the 4th of May, people put, I don't know if today anymore, but when I grew up, the 4th, everybody had candles in their windows. In the evening of the 4th of May. And then in Sweden also, they was very, very happy together with the Danes, but the Danish brigade was still in Sweden, and they only arrived to Denmark the 7th of May. In the meantime, in Denmark, there was no government, there was no police, and the Germans had capitulated. So actually the underground became overground, and now they could show themselves, a lot of the resistance fighters. And here is the group my father was with, called General Johansen's company. They got order to meet in the harbor of Skovshoved very early in the morning on the 5th of May. As you can see, my mother, she was not my mother then. This is Ebba, she's standing in the middle. She's the only woman together with them. Anyhow, the job they had to do when they came was to arrest General Werner Best. And that's what they did. And they did it without no problems. He knew what was coming. He was waiting for them. And everything went very smooth and quiet. They took him and they brought him to jail. The 7th, and here we see after they finished that, my mother is relaxing, or Ebba is relaxing here and smiling, very happy that they are starting on a new life. My father returned to Denmark with the Danish brigade the 7th of May, and they were told that anyone which had belonged to a resistance group or some group should return to that group. And so my father went immediately to General Johansen's company, and their job was to arrest traders and informants, anybody that had cooperated with the Germans. That was their job, and my father's job was to interview, write down whatever, and then they and then put them over in jail where they would wait for court and so on. So some of them was not too happy that it was a Jew sitting in front of them interviewing them, but I think my father felt good about that. Anyhow, they continued with this work, and my family that was still in Sweden, they came to Denmark the 30th of May. My grandfather wrote that the 30th of May, they took the train to Göteborg. And there was a big ship that met them. They were about 900 people on that ship. And here on this picture, we see the ship, but we see it from the Danish side. And what I love about this picture is that you see the Danes are standing there with flags, waiting for their Danes returning. They were happy to see them return, which unfortunately not was in all places. And here we see them, they arrived in the harbor, which is the next picture. And here you see how many people were there. Everybody was smiling, waving, and so on. They arrived there in Helsingør. And my grandfather writes that all the way from Helsingør to Copenhagen, people was throwing flowers at them. They were waving, they were saying, welcome, welcome, good that you are back. And they came back, they went to their flat. They got up to their flat. Now, Mrs. Jensen, of course, had cleaned the flat. She had lacquered the floor. She had returned to the pantry the few things that you're taking, probably a kilo of potatoes, a half kilo of sugar, a little bit of butter, but everything was restored where I had been, and she had set a table for dinner for them. And my grandfather, he writes, the flat was like a flower garden. And the moment people heard that they were returning, that started to bring flowers. And he writes in his diary, on the 1st of June, the 2nd of June, 3rd of June, and 4th of June, the flowers continue to arrive. The flowers continue to arrive. When we walk on the street, people are coming towards us. They're hugging us. They're saying, so good to see you back and welcome. Now, I told you that the municipality paid for their rent while they were in Sweden. They also got a little grant when they came now. So not a lot of money, but money enough that they could manage in the beginning until things have settled down. We see here a picture of my grandparents together with their youngest son, Abraham. This is from 1951. There is no pictures from the time of the war. I didn't find anyone. And so they were very happy to back. Now I want to end with the next picture. This is Ebba and Louis. They are still in their resistance uniform. And as you can see, they, I think they very much symbolize their hope for the future. They got married in 1946 and became my parents in 1947. Now, Steven Spielberg made documentaries, witness documentaries from everybody that had been in the Shoah. He also came to Denmark. And so I said to my father, no, so did you make a movie? And my father said, no, Of course not. I didn't suffer. So I said to my father, but also the positive stories have to be told. And that's why I am sitting here today. I want to tell the positive story. I want everybody to know that it is possible to do things in a different way. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You have asked us to play a song.
Yes, I have asked, I wanted to play a song. It is in Yiddish because my father always said that Danish is his mother tongue, but Yiddish is his heart, is the tongue of his heart. And so my grandfather was also, everything was Yiddish, language, culture, theater, everything. So this song, Oiften Tripatik, was one song that my father very much loved. And he asked that it be played at his funeral, which we did. It was played on a violin. It was incredible, beautiful. Anyhow, so please.
Oifen Pripetschik brennt a fire und in Stub is heiß. Und der Rebe lernt kleiner Kinder nach der Malef weiß. Und der Rebe lernt kleiner Kinder nach der Malef weiß. Sätsche Kinderlach, gedenktje Teiere, wo's ihr lernt dort. Sagt je noch einmal und danke noch einmal, kommet's alle vor. Sagt je noch einmal und danke noch einmal, kommet's alle vor. Lernt Kinderlach, lernt mit Freude, lernt dem Alef weiß. Glücklich ist der Jid, wo's kennt die Teure, und du's Alef weiß. Glücklich ist der Jid, wo's kennt die Teure, und du's Alef weiß.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. If anybody has any questions, then please feel free to ask. And else we will go on. And I want to play a Danish song that was written in 45 called Denmark Freak.
Yeah, just
Miriam,
Yes?
why did your parents, your father leave White Russia, and why Denmark?
My father didn't leave, my grandparents
Your
left.
grandfather,
Yes.
okay, why?
Well, because there was a conscription to the Russian army in those years, and the army service was 25 years, and he deserted, if we will say it like this. And there were also programs around where they were. So that a lot of Jews deserted in those years. They all wanted, of course, to get to America, which was the Golden Medina, but I think that they didn't have any more money when he came to Denmark. That's what I think, but I don't know. So they stayed there. That's why he stayed, and then my grandmother came there. He collected money, and he got her to come there too.
Miriam, I was hoping to hear a more detailed story of how your parents actually met.
Yeah, but you know, this is short. I can't, there's a lot I would like to tell.
Okay, we'll
There's
talk
so
later.
many things, but they did meet. They met in the youth movement of the Labor Party. That's where they met. You know, my mother was 16 and my father was 22 on that year, you know, and they followed through the, you know, and the war. My father was in Sweden. My mother continued with the underground movement, resistance movement in Denmark, and she was there. And her parents was one of the places they were hiding people that was escaping from the Germans and bringing them over to Sweden. And after the war, they met again. That is short. Yes.
I just wanted to say thank you so much for doing this evening in English. I'm so grateful to, you know, have been able to hear this amazing story. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And then I love you, Miriam. It's so nice to hear your voice.
Okay. Hello, Karina. How are you? Nice to see you.
Can I ask you a
Yes.
question, Miriam?
Yes.
Okay, it's a history question, so maybe I should just look it up. But how?
Yeah, but you can try. I can try.
I know that's okay. Like England, of course, Denmark has a monarchy, but I'm assuming that it's also a constitutional monarchy. How long has Denmark had a parliament? In other words, an active and representative parliament that had real power. My sense is it was very
It had real power. The king didn't have really power, but he was like a kind of top of the cake. I believe 100 years probably already.
Okay, so
I think so. It was not. Yeah, it is a monarchy, but you know, but still. Also today, the queen there is, you know, but he had more to say than the queen is today. I mean, they always discussed with the king what should we do and things.
So it's very much a constitutional monarchy. There's a reason I'm asking.
Yes. Yeah.
There's a historian from Yale University named Timothy Snyder, writes a lot about Eastern Europe in particular, but also has a theory, a thesis, that countries that had a very strong and mature parliamentary process were the ones most able to actually save Jews, okay, where their parliaments were mature, even when they were flawed and even when they had problems, just the fact that they're, so I'm just, and he uses Denmark as one of his examples.
Okay, that's very interesting. I mean, the
This is
king,
Bulgaria as the other example
right,
where
right,
some
yeah.
kind of parliament, even when it's flawed, is
The
better than
king
nothing.
was a house arrest when the government resigned. He was put in house arrest, and there were guards watching him all the time. You know.
Mhm.
Yes.
Interesting. Mhm.
Mhm.
Thank you.
You're
Is that
welcome.
good?
Is there any more questions? No. Okay. So let's hear. Roma, if you want to say something, you'll have to unmute yourself.
I thought I'd unmuted myself.
Okay.
I just wanted to say thank you. Absolutely
welcome.
fascinating. And I remembered both your parents. Lovely,
Yes.
lovely people.
Yes. Thank you very much.
We will finish with the song Denmark Free. And I want to thank you again, Miriam. It's been a pleasure to learn from you and to hear this story from you. And everyone, you can either listen or leave at your own pace, and have a good night. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you for helping me doing that. Yes. Okay.
Okay.
So fun to see you. Wonderful to see you. Okay.
En lærke lette og tusind fulgte, og straks fra luften et væld af sang. De tusind tårne tog til at tone, så landet fyldtes af klokkers klang. Byer blomstrede i rødt og hvidt, og det var for Danmark frit. Ja, Danmark frit. Det var en morgen, som tusind tusind andre, og ingen morgen i 1000 år. Da Danmark vågnede med klare øjne til glædestimer og frimandskår. Og landet lyste fra Sund til Klit, for det var for Danmark frit. Ja, Danmark frit. Stille de tapre døde, hvis navne lever i Danmarks navn. Og takken søger til dem, der sejne, og dem, der sidder med tunge savn. Udtrøste dem, der har lidt og stridt, til det blev for Danmark frit. Ja, Danmark frit. Men du som styrter de stoltes riger og løser fangene af bold og bånd, dig flyver hjerternes tak i møde, hvor skæbne er i din stærke hånd. Nu er det for og Danmark frit, velsignede herre fra Sund til Klit, fra Sund til Klit.
Okay,
Great.
it was wonderful to see you all. No
Thank
problem.
you so much. Thank
No,
you.
okay.
Amazing story. An amazing story, really.
Good to hear. Now
Ah.
it's nice to see Suze. How are you, Suze? It's great. All right. All right. So good to see everybody, and I guess we'll leave
Okay.
now.
We'll
Okay.
say good night.
Bye.
And
Good night. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Shavua Tov, Chag Sameach.
Yeah. Okay.
Samech.
All right.